Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Please join me and my guests on this interview. Keir Starmer, the UK's newly elected Prime Minister, recently met with French President Emmanuel Macron as part of a broader effort to reset post-Brexit relations with Europe. The discussions covered key issues like migration, defense, and security, along with the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. Macron, who's also focused on strengthening EU ties, is simultaneously engaging with Serbia, highlighting France's strategic influence in Europe. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack these developments is Romain Le Quiniou, a Managing Director of Europe Creative. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So can you help us understand how the Starmer's meeting with Macron does it signal a shift in UK-France relations, particularly in this post-Brexit context?
A shift, I don't know, but for sure there is something that should be called a reset, because we need to remind that the French-UK relationship, the bilateral relation, was particularly awful over the past few years between the two governments. And I think that, the tensions were very high for a simple reason, is that it was difficult both for Paris and London to adapt to post-Brexit realities. And we have to say that both governments also played on these tensions to raise some domestic political gains. Now, that being said, it's not the first time that President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer are meeting together individually. And we have to remind that last year already, when Starmer was only the Labour Party leader, they already met and they started to plan for this reset, for basically building back the bilateral relations. Unfortunately, the timing is not the best for a simple reason. France has no government today. There is outgoing government, but the new government is impossible to form as of today. And most difficult part of this is that we have to accept from France that political instability might continue for a few weeks, if not for a few months, and at least for a year, if not for 3. So this is not a very, very great moment to rebuild the relationship, unfortunately. But still, I think that, despite the fact that this meeting was a bit minimal, they talked about main potential cooperation, but we need to talk more. And especially there is one field where UK and France have to cooperate on, because they can gain benefits, but they can also produce benefits for all of Europe, is defense and security cooperation, in particular since 2022.
Right. You just mentioned something very interesting there about how both countries previously were building on the tension for its political gains within the country. Now we're seeing, like you mentioned, political instability that is still taking place in France. Do you think this might be something to worry about, the fact that perhaps there's, once again, utility in playing up these tensions for internal politics?
I think now it's a different situation also, and even if the tensions were really important between the two governments before, we have to see that since 2022, both countries and both governments were trying to find ways of appeasement, right? And once again, I think that defense and cooperation is the way forward to engage for both Paris and London. And maybe there is a potential, to have, especially we know that US elections are coming up, and in case of the return of Donald Trump, again, the potential of cooperation and the necessity of cooperation for Paris and London will be very important. And here on defense and security, I think that as the two biggest power when it comes to military, France and the UK really need to strengthen their cooperation, because they can ensure basically or compensate a reduced presence of the US. And we see that the UK is the most important European player when it comes to security in the Baltic Sea. France has strengthened its presence and its influence in the Black Sea region. And I really believe that France and the UK can ensure this security environment on the eastern flank, cooperating also with very important partners from Central Eastern Europe, naming Poland and Romania. And with this quatuor, Paris and London can also revive their own role and presence in the European Union.
Right, like you mentioned, people are now focusing on what unites us rather than what's dividing us, and security is one of the very important issues that is being touched upon. One of the things I also noticed that is a common issue is the issue of migration, which is pressing for UK and France as well. How might this dialogue influence broader EU policies?
Absolutely. Part of the reset on French UK relation will be on migration. We can see that the tensions were particularly focusing on this topic, and particularly with the border between the two countries, which is a complicated border, right? It's on the sea, and the tension was particularly important in Calais, for example, in north of France, where the boats are leaving and where the train is leaving. So I think it will be critical for both countries to find ways of engaging and finding solutions that are convenient for everybody, basically, and also their cooperation on this issue can influence also some developments at the EU level. We know that in Brussels there was the vote last year of the Migration and Asylum Pact. It's a good way forward, but it cannot fix everything. And what is crucial is basically for UK and France finding ways to decrease instability in regions such as Middle East and Africa, because this is the main source of migration. And even if we vote pact like we did last year, it cannot fix everything because it's very difficult. Now there is a consensus, I believe, in Europe. This is about basically reducing immigration, general immigration, illegal immigration in particular, reinforcing our borders. But in the same time, there is the reality where we need a bit of migration, selected one, if I may call it like this, for our needs in the job market. So, it's a very difficult situation. And here, the UK and France, with a positive cooperation, have a role to play.
Okay. Starmer recently said that he cannot sidestep Brussels in an attempt to repair UK-EU relationships. What challenges do you see arising from Starmer's intention to reset relations with Europe without reversing the Brexit position, especially when compared to Macron's EU-focused diplomacy?
I think that Prime Minister Starmer has been quite clear about this. He's in Germany and in France for a simple reason. So he wants to reset this relationship with the EU. So he's going to see the two main capital, or it used to be the main couple, as we call it in France. Now the reality is a bit different, but still important to come to both Berlin and Paris. But what he wants to do, what he wants for UK, is to find a way to make emerge win-win situation between the UK and the EU. And here he's talking about three things mainly. He's talking about developing economic trade, also improving defense cooperation, security on the European continent, and lastly about migration. We already talked about this. So it's very clear that he wants to achieve these three things as the key sectors of this re-emerging cooperation. In the same time, Prime Minister Starmer is facing a very simple political situation at home. He cannot undo the Brexit. Prime Minister Starmer, back in the days, voted against the Brexit, but he also promised before the election, and during the visit in Berlin, he said it again: there is no reversal of the Brexit. It will not happen. The UK will not rejoin the European Union, and this is a reality that everyone has to understand. In the same time, during his visit to Berlin, Starmer was clear on the fact that the UK will not rejoin, for example, mobility program such as Erasmus for UK. So what he wants to do is to develop pragmatic and mutually beneficial cooperation, but he doesn't want to bring back the UK to the EU institutional framework of cooperation, such as free market, such as Schengen space, such as also more particularly mobility schemes.
Right. So very quickly, when it comes to this diplomatic effort, do you see the biggest road bump, the biggest challenge coming from domestic or internationally?
What do you mean for Prime Minister Starmer?
Right.
Well, I think that there is multiple challenges coming ahead. Political situation, domestic situation, of course, because he said it also, there is a rise of populistic movements and forces in the UK. We saw it a few days ago. But in the same time, it's a very, very tense situation for everyone, including the UK, when it comes to international situation. And again, I want to point out that if the US election is leading to a return of Donald Trump, this will be a very tricky situation for the UK, and they will need as soon as possible to build even better relationship with the EU. And
definitely a
European
lot
countries.
of moving pieces all coming into this one situation. So thank you so much for helping us breaking all of that down. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you very much. See you.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.